Good evening and welcome back to another episode of Historical Society. I'm your host, Caroline, and today's special episode will feature the Industrial Revolution. This revolution made the world what it is today. It began in the late 18th century and since has spread across many nations, leaving a lasting impact. During this era, several new inventions were created, making people's lives easier. For some, it brought them wealth and power. As for others, it brought them starvation, an outbreak of fatal diseases, and terrible living conditions. It only took one lifetime for Europe to transform into an industrial and economic continent which formed powerful militaries. This is the Industrial Revolution. Before the Industrial Revolution, during the early 18th century, the Agricultural Revolution occurred. It was when landowners started the enclosure movement, stopping peasants' access to the common land. But as new technology was invented, such as steam-powered machines, it meant that people needed to find new ways to make money, as farming was becoming a more challenging lifestyle. As a result, majority of poor families were forced to move into cities, where they were employed as factory workers. This caused the population to skyrocket as people were getting married at younger ages and were encouraged to have larger families, especially the poor, since as soon as their children could walk, they were sent to work. Growth of the Industrial Revolution meant that middle-class businessmen and other professionals became more powerful. They received better food and more pleasant and sanitary living conditions. As for the working class, everyone moving into the cities and the increase in population left them with crowded and uncomfortable living conditions. Often, factory owners took charge in building houses for their employees, using the cheapest possible materials of the poorest quality. Families were regularly crowded into single rooms for cooking, eating, and sleeping. The working class feared unemployment due to new machinery taking over their jobs in the factories, but factory owners cared more about how much money they were making in the new economy. Though the working class were living in poverty, earning just enough to survive, England was becoming an extremely wealthy and powerful country. The Industrial Revolution saw a major increase in the economy when production shifted from cottage industries to factories. Now goods were being produced on a larger scale. This growth depended on textiles and metal goods' heavy export. It also depended on large amounts of low-paid labor and productivity. The first banks were created during these times. They started investing in factories and businesses, and this helped companies profit and encouraged others to do the same. When the working class became displeased with what they were earning and started riots and strikes because they wanted to improve their wages, so they began destroying machinery. Eventually, the government stepped in and had to give in. The lives of the working class started to improve. If factory owners remained in control, these conditions would have stayed the same or worsened. As a result, people moved to the urban centres. They gradually looked to their governments for support as their conditions got worse. The government created many new laws to help these people fit into their new lifestyles. For example, some new laws gave peasants individual rights and minimal freedom. But as the population doubles, cities expanded without any proper planning or full government control. This led factory owners to take over charge in providing workhouses for employees. Life expectancy wasn't long, and often parents died before their children. So, with the help of the church, factory owners took these children into care. They hired children because they demanded less pay and were easier to control. They also worked long hours in tight spaces with little to no breaks. Some children worked deadly jobs such as climbing boys and chimney sweepers. So eventually, from 1788 to 1864, the British Parliament passed laws that stopped employment of young children for specific roles. Pickpocketing was a common crime in the 18th century. Unemployed children or adults usually worked as individuals or in groups in crowded areas. This crime could be punishable by death. There were other punishments. the most common one was being sent to government prisons. Eventually, these became too overcrowded, so Parliament sent convicts to Australia, although this was not very good for the environment. During the 18th century, the environment had never really been considered. Factories produced massive clouds of smoke and sometimes shut down a whole city due to lack of visibility. Streets were narrow with open manholes running down the middle. Rubbish was thrown into these streets and was left to rot since there was no proper rubbish collection. There was no piped water supply to the factory employee housing, so water would be collected from communal wells or rivers. The overflow of sewage meant that these sources of drinking water were exposed to contamination. This led to diseases spreading, especially in densely populated areas. The Great Stink occurred in 1858, when many households illegally joined their cesspits to drains that connected to London's main drinking source, also known as the River Thames. Previously, this river had been clear of pollution and supplied lobsters, salmon, and other species of fish. One specific summer, temperatures reached such a high level that the river let out a dreadful stench. This led to Parliament finally taking action against sewage problems in Britain. Their solution was to create a modern underground sewage system with 6 interceptor sewers, reaching a total length of 160 kilometres. It's so large that it still exists today. The Industrial Revolution had effects on human civilization that's still highly visible today. The use of coal as an energy source caused a massive change from hand to powered tools and brought unwanted environmental impacts that have influenced global warming. It also led to conditions enabling rapid population growth, food production, and all other basic needs to human existence. Thank you for watching Historical Society, and join us next week when we travel back in time and explore the Viking era.